What's up, guys? Welcome back to the shop. Today's video we're going to be finishing off this knife that I started last week, and unfortunately I wasn't able to finish, so we're going to finish it up this week. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to clean it all off because it has all this scale and crud on it, and I'm going to do that with my diamond wheel, and then we'll get to refining our shape. Hey guys, so right here I'm just busting out my handy dandy ruler and I'm gonna mark some lines for my profile. Fortunately, I did forge it pretty close to the shape that I wanted, so there was just some minor parts I had to grind out, not too much. I would like to be a little bit better on forging in my tip. Here I had to grind in my tip because it ended up being a little bit too square, but other than that, I think the forging came out pretty nice. Now all I'm gonna do is profile it with my 2x72 and try to get in that step for my hidden tang. In hindsight, I think next time I'm gonna do my choil area, I think it's what it's called, which is pretty much the transition from the steel to the wood. I'm gonna do that a little bit thinner. Here I had it a little bit wider. It ended up being about an inch. And because of that, I ended up making my handle a little bit wider than I would normally like it there. So next time I'm thinking I'm probably going to do it about 3/4. I don't really have a standard size down yet. I just really go by feel whenever I do these, as you can see by the random Sharpie lines. So I'm thinking I'm probably going to do it 3/4 next time. Sometimes whenever I'm not really sure about a knife, I go grab an older knife to use as reference, because I have so many of my knives here that I've been making because I've been pretty lazy about putting them online for sale, which I should do soon. But I go and I just check them and get reference. Oh, I like how I did this handle, or I like how I did this shape, and I'll go grab them for reference, and then I'll mimic it onto the next knife. Alright guys, so the knife is ground. Because my wheel is only 2 inches, it doesn't always grab the last like 1/4 inch or so in here. So I ended up just grinding that out afterwards, getting it nice and flat. I overground a little bit here with my wheel, but it's not a big issue. I'm still going to take all that material off whenever I end up grinding in my bevels. And here I had a deep spot on my forging, which is also not an issue. It'll come out once I grind in my bevels. I still got a pretty thick blade, but it's nice and even. That's why I left it pretty thick, because I knew I was gonna surface grind all that material, because I want it to be as clean as possible up here. I do have this little spot right here, which it's not really deep, I'm hoping, and hopefully that grinds out once I grind in my bevels and bring them up to the spine and run over my spine and all that good stuff. And if it doesn't, then I might just have to change the profile on this guy just a little bit to get rid of it. But I'm hoping I don't have to do that. Other than that, it's right where it needs to be. I'm going to give it a couple cycles on the oven. Does it fit in the oven? Might fit in the oven. I'm going to give it a couple cycles, and then I'm going to go on ahead and heat treat it. Alright, so I checked that out in my oven, and it is that much too long, so I'm going to have to cut that off, and then it will fit in there perfectly, which isn't too big of a deal. I have plenty of tang. I can get away with even removing slightly less than that, but it's a bummer regardless. So if any heat treating oven companies wants to sponsor my shop with an oven that's like 24-30 inches, I mean, I wouldn't mind that. Now, I do find myself in this predicament quite often where I have to cut off some of my tang to be able to fit in my oven, because I made it a little bit too big. But hopefully I can save up enough money here by the end of the year to upgrade to a bigger one. I'll probably still keep this one for smaller knives, but I definitely would like to have a bigger oven in my shop. Alright guys, so we are out of the temper, and you can see the ball bearings popping out through that temper, especially towards the tip. You can see them out there moving around in there. Oop. That looks very, very cool. I can't wait to get that finish grind on this, and we can see it clearly instead of the way it's shown here, but you can definitely see it in there. It looks very, very cool. So next thing to do, I'm gonna get my finished grind in. I'm gonna grind in my bevels. It has a minor little warp towards the tip. I'll probably fix that with the carbide peen, and the rest will just grind in. But so far so good. I can't really stress enough how much this little hammer has been an upgrade and a help in my shop. Now, this hammer, you could probably buy it yourself for around $100, $110 online. Already made, and it's a very, very helpful tool. It's basically just a carbide ball that's in a small hammer, and you basically just hammer your knife out. So these little divots are made because the carbide is so much harder than the actual steel. So whenever you hit it, it displaces the steel and moves it over. And it takes away the risk of overdoing it, trying to bend the knife in the right direction, or trying to waste time reheat treating it and tying it down and shimming it and doing all kinds of other stuff that you run a risk of stressing your knife too much and damaging it. So it's definitely something you should have in your shop, and you can make it for 20 bucks if you want to make it yourself instead of having to order it online already made. Alright guys, so I'm going to move on to the handles. This is a piece of material that I had sent out, and it was stabilized along. It was a big block that I had stabilized with my buddy Mike, and he's the one that previously had sent me other handle material. So for this knife I want to use some more natural looking material. So this is stabilized spalted maple, I believe, and it looks pretty cool. And so this is material he sent me that I'll probably be using on future projects. And if you want to check out the material that he makes and sells, I'll have a link to his shop in the description down below. Check it out. And thank you, Mike, for stabilizing that material for me. And so speaking of this material, since it was spalted, it had some minor defects in it, which isn't too much of a deal. This is one of the parts where I guess it was burrowed into and was rotted out, which is fine. I'll just end up removing that material because I don't need it for this particular handle. But I think the material looks great. It's stabilized, so it's going to hold its own pretty well. And I think I'm going to pair it up with seam. So I noticed in the video I didn't say, but I'm pairing it up with a chunk of ebony or African blackwood, and I'm using it just as the front part of my knife. Now I use this because I'm not very good at drilling in the opening as much as I would like to, so I use this and some black epoxy, and I kind of hide it a little bit. Hopefully in the near future I can get myself a mini mill and I could do a lot better slots, but for the meantime it's just whatever drill bit I find close enough to size and a little bit of filing. Truth be told, you can make a really nice knife with very little tools, but if you really want to get into those small details that don't really make a big difference in the knife physically, like for usage, but aesthetically make a big difference, you do definitely need to have some kind of specialized machinery for those things. Not to say that you absolutely need it, but it definitely does help, and especially it speeds up the process as well. So I hope to one day hopefully have a bigger shop with plenty of big fancy tools that I can use to make knives. But at the same time, you definitely have to make sure you have your basics down. I myself made the mistake of going straight into forging Damascus without going into forging my knives. So instead of starting where most people start with forging a knife or maybe just doing some stock removals, I went straight to making myself a homemade press and forging Damascus, so I would make some very nice patterns and some very ugly knives. And because of that, I've spent a lot of money on material to make very subpar knives that are very elegant but not as user friendly as they could be. But back to the video. Here I'm just gluing up my two pieces. I use super glue to hold them together. Maybe not the best, but I will be using epoxy to hold them at the very end of the day through the inside, so I think this method works pretty well. Here I'm gonna be using some epoxy to embed the knife, the shape of the knife tang in there, so that I can mark up my handle and be able to work it better and have more precise measurements. That way
I know every time I put in my tang, it's going to fit in here exactly how it needs to. And I'm using some Johnson paste wax to make sure that my tang doesn't actually get stuck in the epoxy. So about 2 or 3 hours after I put in my tang with my epoxy, I can just come back and pop it right out before the epoxy fully solidifies, and then I can't. Fortunately, I've never forgotten my knife in there and let it fully cure.
Alright guys, so the embedding worked out well. It's in there nice and tight, and I can remove it whenever I want. I can't do it with one hand, it's kind of difficult. So I'm going to scribe on some reference lines for this guy, and we're going to go from there. That way I can cut everything off on the bandsaw, and then I can do whatever minor tweaks I need with the 2x72. Looks a little weird now, but we're going to go on ahead and fix that up.
So here I'm using a height gauge, and I'm basically scribing a line to the center of my knife. That way I can use it for reference on where to mark my lines for shaping my handle to my tang. Now what I have here is a piece of quartz that I use for my platform and my reference point. A lot of people use a piece of granite that is precisely machined for being able to do these things. I got this piece of quartz. It's pretty straight. I got it for free, so that's what I use. And with that, I measured in my taper, marked my lines, and here I'm cutting them out on my bandsaw. Whenever I make my handles, I like to taper them back towards the end, having a little bit thicker wherever I'm holding towards the front, and then towards the end make them just a little bit thicker so it feels a lot more comfortable in the hand. But how I said earlier in the video, since I ended up making my transition area a little bit wider than I normally would, I ended up making the handle just a little bit wider, and I ended up with more of an oval handle than I wanted to. I like to make my handles oval. I like to make them, many other makers like to make them more with straight lines, and I don't know. I personally prefer to make softer, rounder lines because I feel like it feels more comfortable in the hand. But I ended up making it just a little more oval. I would have preferred a little bit more circular. Still an oval, but not quite as elongated as I ended up making it. It is still comfortable in the hand. I made sure it was pretty comfortable, but maybe for somebody with a bigger hand. So fortunately, it worked out in the end. It's a little different, but it's still very comfortable. At least for me. One thing to note is that this wood is very, very soft, so it's very easy to over grind it and end up removing a lot of material or making big old gouges in it. So now all that's left to do is to hand sand my material and get it ready for our edge. I'd like to quickly ask you guys, if you enjoy these videos, if you enjoy my content, to make sure you are subscribed. A lot of my subscribers or viewers aren't subscribed, and I would really appreciate it if you would. I'm on a mission to be able to hit 250,000 subscribers. So if you'd like to help me with that, I would really appreciate it. It is free, and I would really appreciate it. Also, if you like the knife, be sure to comment down below and like the video. That really helps push it out to a broader audience, and that would help me be able to make the best knives that I can on a regular basis. As always, guys, I really appreciate it, and let's get back to the build. So here I'm just sharpening in my knife. As you've noticed, maybe you haven't, the handle is already on there. I am not gluing up this handle because I am really low on time, but I will explain that here in the video shortly.
Alright guys, so the knife is done. It came out pretty nice. I like the figuring it got there towards the end. I'm not sure exactly why, but that looks pretty cool. And the handle, I think, turned out pretty nice. It's gorgeous. I love this material. It's a very natural look, but also has some movement in it. Overall, pretty nice piece. One thing I did run into on this knife is that, for starters, I don't know why, but I wiped it here and it kind of blurred a little versus the rest. So I think I'm gonna have to resand it and coffee etch it, but I'm not gonna do that in this video, obviously. I'm running out of time. But I had this piece right here, particularly, that it ended up turning out like very, very light color, almost white. I ended up having to resand it and re-etch it, and again it turned out like that. I'm not sure why, but it's already been coffee etched and sanded twice. This side, on the other hand, came out very, very nice. Came out spotless, and it even had some darker spots. I'm not sure where they're at. But whenever I pulled it out of the coffee, it had some parts that were darker, just like this side had that one lighter spot. That I'm not sure why it ended up like that. Yeah, you can see the spot better. But other than that, it came out pretty nice. I have not glued the handle in yet. See, popped it off. I have not glued it yet because I have a birthday party to go to, and it is Saturday. So if you're watching this at the time it comes out, it's literally the day before, and I still have to edit the video. So I'm not gonna glue it up yet. I'm gonna glue it up later because the glue takes about 7 to 10 hours to set up to, you know, cure, and I just don't have enough time for that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna not glue it up in this video, but you can imagine it's glued up, and that's pretty much it for this knife. Overall, I'm very happy with the way it turned out. I think I'm gonna end up hand sanding it and re-etching it just to get rid of this little haze, and then I'll glue it up. But other than that, the knife came out pretty nice. I'm very, very happy with it, and I'm very happy with the handle. And as always, guys, thank you very much for watching. I greatly appreciate it, and I will catch you guys on the next one. Peace.